Welcome to Out of the Box with Christine, the podcast for conscious entrepreneurs. Are you willing to step into your greatness? Are you ready to shine? Well, get ready, Truth Seeker. You're in for an amazing ride. And now, here's the host of the show, Christine Blosdale.
Welcome back Out of the Boxers to Out of the Box with Christine. I'm your host, Christine Blosdale, and I am super excited about today's show. I'm happy that you're here. Make sure you buckle up because we are going to be talking with Misha Rubin, who is the CEO of Leap by Design and the mastermind behind the Career Leap method. He works with mid-career professionals, executives, and leaders of all stripes who are interested in initiating and implementing meaningful and intentional career changes and or expanding their leadership impact. And I like this because this is about being scary and jumping off that perpetual cliff and maybe not knowing where you're going to land, but having the faith and also knowing that you have the skill set behind you. Not until very long ago, he was actually a partner at a Big Four management consulting and accounting firm, which is Ernst Young, which is one of the biggest companies. I am very familiar with them, where he spent 15 fruitful years of his career. And through his own corporate experience, personal quest for meaningful and work, and meeting hundreds of professionals, he has now created the Career Leap method, and he's my special guest today. Misha Rubin, thank you so much for joining me and being on Out of the Box with Christine.
Christine, it's truly a pleasure to be with you.
So let's talk about this because you had your own career leap, obviously, 15 years in a major company. Was it also, were you there in New York at Ernst Young for this time?
Yeah.
So you were there that whole time. So let's talk about your journey. First of all, how did you find yourself? I understand that you're from Ukraine, and how did you find yourself here in America?
Well, about 29 years ago, my family immigrated. I was right in the midst of my studies, so I finished my education. I got my degree in computer science and math at NYU. And I remember it's a very interesting kind of time to go back to there because it's when you're so young, you kind of really think there's so many possibilities, and then you look at the conversations that happening in your community. It might not be necessarily even like a pressure that somebody's forcing you to do something, but the conversation around, there were Russian speaking immigrants from the former Soviet Union. The conversation was go get a degree in computer science, go graduate as soon as possible, and go get a job on Wall Street. That was the type of the conversation. And I wish somebody took my hand then and just had me pause and say, Misha, so much is possible. What do you really want to do? Just think about it. But nobody does that, right?
Nobody
Very
does.
rarely. No.
No.
So here we are.
But isn't it interesting? Because when you were talking about that, I was just having a flashback myself,
Hmm.
sort of after high school and then going through college, because there was no question. It was like, oh, you're going to college. You're going to university. That's not a question. And I'm glad I did because I didn't know what I wanted to do out of high school. Um, I think when I was really young, I wanted to be like a scientist or something, just because I had a microscope. Um, but when you're going to college and you have to have a degree, so you kind of have to narrow down what it is that you somewhat want to do. You're still experiencing life. You're still figuring out what it is that you want to do out of life. So did you know that though? Did you feel like you were uh, kind of placed into an area where you could experience those different courses and learn a little bit more about what you do want, or did you just say,
No,
"This is what I got to do"?
no, the immigrants, they're to survive and to make it. So no, there was no room and time to think about what it is really, and there was no also context for that, because I know it's not only for immigrants, that that type of a conversation, there is no good framework for it. That's basically was my realization and my personal inquiry. And I spent over 20 years on Wall Street, and I tried a lot of things, and in my personal quest of so what I should do next. So I kind of always had a feeling this is not it, this is not it. But the question, how do I get to what is it? Though I didn't find any framework to think about that. And that was one of the reasons that after I jumped off the cliff, and I will talk more about that, but as I jumped off the cliff, I realized that we need a process, almost like a method, to help guide people to think about what it is they are here to do and how to make both choice that's meaningful and intentional and practical and works for life, how to do that. And that's what I've been doing for the past 2.5 years.
That's beautiful. Oh, that makes me feel so soft and gooey inside when you say that. But you're right. The pressure of actually being, an immigrant's child, a son of an immigrant. You hear, and I know what my mom, and my dad was American, but my mom was from North Africa, and just her process of getting to the country and how she was treated. I mean, back in those days too, they weren't kind of foreigners, right? They were like, speak American. But the pressure, especially if you're coming from a family that's sacrificed a lot to get here, it's like it's all on the golden child now. It's like
Right.
we walked 10,000 miles barefoot to get you here, and now you have all of this, these opportunities, and they're really, um, even if they don't say it, like you said, even if they don't sit down and say, you're our hope, you need to make it. But that is a lot of pressure on someone, right? Because how many young people know exactly, they wake up and they know exactly, this is what I want to do and this is what I'm passionate about, because we have many passions usually when we're younger. um but yeah, that must have put a little bit of extra pressure on you as well. Let's talk about your own, so that leap that you made um just a few years ago, and
Mhm.
and and the process that you sort of went through. Maybe you can help our listeners and our viewers that are on YouTube, help guide them a little bit if they're going through the same thing.
Sure. Well, let me tell you what I did, and I don't recommend you do that. So
Right.
I was sitting in a meeting in one of these new service offering meetings where we were thinking about what is the next thing that we're going to sell to our clients, which are for the most part large banks. And as I was sitting in that meeting, and at that time I was, partner for 5 years. I was making more money than I could have ever imagined as an immigrant coming to the United States. I had recognition, you name it. And I was unfulfilled at my job at the same time. And as everybody participated in this conversation during that meeting, and I remember that I started saying something in this really, the serious work voice, And as I was speaking, I heard my quiet voice that told me, there is no way you're going to be doing this anymore. You're done. It was just so, I call it a moment of truth. I call it a moment of choice, um, or I just knew that I'm done, and I jumped off the cliff. And one of the reasons that I developed the career leap method is so that people don't have to jump off the cliff. I don't think it's necessarily a good idea, not necessarily a good idea for most people to do that. Um, yeah, and I always knew that I wanted to do something in in personal development space. I was very interested about that. And at the same time, I didn't have a clear idea. So as I'm sitting there and making this decision, I'm a breadwinner in the family. I have 3 young children. I'm not clear what it is exactly I want to do. So it was actually really scary. That's why I call it jumping off the cliff. And that's why I say, don't do it unless you really have to.
Have
Um,
a plan of some sort. Yeah.
yeah. But it was the impulse was very strong. It was very strong, and I just followed it. And I just knew that that was my time. And about several months into that, as it often happens with me, I woke up and I suddenly knew exactly why I wasn't fulfilled. Like I had language for it. I could articulate it. And that was the beginning of the career leap method. And then since then, I've been working with people in, I call it that I facilitate meaningful, intentional life changes. And in the areas of career, in the area of leadership. So if there is a leader that wants to maximize their impact in the area of business, if somebody wants to be in a business that's aligned, and also with people that are retiring and thinking about their legacy. So those are the areas of my interest and my expertise.
So you're taking your best qualities and facilitating people in meaningful work where you actually you're not dreading that Monday. You know, I've spoken to so many people who um well, that's what I think that's when so many people have like heart attacks and things is like on a Monday. um that dread of, oh, I've got to do this again, and all of the stuff that comes with it, and still being tied, because it's very difficult for people to pull away from. It's easier to know, what is it, it's easier to know the devil that you know than the than something that they don't know. So even though doing that same the job that, and it doesn't matter if they're in the corporate world or if they're going to a brick and mortar, working at a pizza shop, whatever it is that brings you that dread or that unfulfillment, then that's a really tough thing to do. Like as you say, when you're the breadwinner, when you have kids, when you have a mortgage, to say, to listen to that voice and to quiet ourselves to the point to listen to that voice. That's really key, don't you think? To be able to
I think
quiet
that
yourself. Mhm.
I think I spent a lot of time thinking about that and also talking to so many people now. I think part of it that people really don't know how to get out. There is a no, and I think and people also not clear what it is they want to do. So when you're not clear what it is you want to do and how to discover, then that fear is so huge because you can't really answer any of the questions and prepare yourself for any future. But I always say if you had a method of discovering what it is, and if you could evaluate whether it's the right choice, whether you're prepared, whether what else you need, whether maybe you do need to have some extra education, or maybe you do need to have some savings if you want to start a bit. Like if you could really go through this process of thinking this through, of looking at all your options, of evaluating them, of diving deep into several ones and see, then you still then it's not jumping off the cliff, then it's making a leap. And then I think you still, there is fear and there is still a risk, but not as big as when you jump off the cliff, but you have no idea what it is. And I think where people get stuck is that, and I remember myself in that space, but you really just don't know what it is. And when you don't know what it is, it's kind of you kind of paralyzed.
I can see that conversation coming home. Honey, guess what? I quit my job. I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to do something else, and I don't know what it is. That would be a great conversation to listen into. Um,
Well, that's why I say you want to prepare, your board of supporters, and a big
yeah,
part of board of supporters are the people that are called your life partners, which would be your spouses or people that you live with together, your significant others. So you want to be having these conversations with them early on about what it is you want, what it is you're not happy with. So they kind of with you on that journey. So when you are pulling a plug, they are your biggest supporters, and it's
exactly.
your job to turn them into biggest supporters.
So, would you say that most of your clients are these folks that have already sort of pulled the plug, and are like free falling, or are they people that are already in high levels, different positions in the corporate world, and this is something that they've been thinking about, and they're smart enough to contact you before they write that letter, right? And hit
Yeah,
send.
most again, I specifically designed this method so people don't need to be in free fall.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of people that come to me, they kind of been in that space of questioning. So what it is should I do? It's very interesting. There's this age group of people that come to me, 55. That's exactly the age. I have several clients, and I feel like there's something that happens at that time, like if not now, then when? But then people come to me in 40s and in 30s when they feel like they're ready. It's almost like you need to know that it's time to go and get your life aligned.
And sometimes you need to have those moments. um I guess great change a lot of times happens when you hit that wall, right? When you're doing something in life, and you'll keep doing it, and then when you hit that wall, whatever it is, whatever major event happens, that can at times facilitate change, in a person. But the the idea too, that to do something meaningful with our lives, this is
Mm.
something that's really, really important. And I find that, a lot of people, well, a lot of our wonderful listeners, they get it about the idea of doing something meaningful with the work that they do. But can you talk a little bit about that? And um, something meaningful is different for everybody, right? I
Yeah,
mean, yeah. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So one of my revelation was for myself and with others that in order to make choices about your future career steps, you need to have a criteria. How you're going to evaluate them. And that criteria, it consists of a few pieces, but one of them is actually something intrinsic to who you are. It's something really how you are. And I call it your personal guiding criteria. So so inside of that criteria, there are things like your vocational values or your strengths, your motivational mechanisms, and your interpersonal profile. So if you, for instance, understand your vocational values, let me use myself as an example. So my vocational values are making a difference, clarity, and creating. So once you understand your vocational values, you know immediately why you're not fulfilled with your current job. And it also creates parameters for what type of industry you want to be in, what type of organization you want to be in what type of a role you want to be in. So then, and then, I remember when I was still kind of in this inquiry, what should I do next? And I've heard a lot, like, just follow your passions, follow your dreams. There's all these like screaming around happening, right? And that made me feel so lost because it kind of wasn't guiding me. And then I realized that passion is an outcome. You know, if you are living inside of your values paradigm, right? If you are in the right industry and the right organization and doing the right thing, or if you have your own business and it's aligned with your values, if you then passion is very likely to arrive. It's truly an outcome of alignment, but it's not something to necessarily chase on the first place.
Right, right. It's being it's it, it's being in a space too um that you can pull from, so
Right.
that when you have, because not every day is going to be roses and wine. It's whatever it is that you do. And even if you change careers, and you're doing
Mm.
something, or you start your own business after working for a company or a corporation for a long time, there's going to be moments, but but because you're doing something that you're in alignment with, those down days or those rough days seem to be a little bit easier to handle, because you're at least doing something that towards something that you're passionate about. um
I was just discussing this with my client, this. She said, in my life, like what I noticed, this is not like I want it in this particular way, and it's not like that. And I said, by the way, this is not going away. This is always the case. But When you wake up in the morning and you know why you're doing all these things that you're doing, that the clarity of the meaning and purpose of those things is unquestionable, then it's very different context. But things, I just, applied for this grant, and somebody was, for children of Ukraine, for this organization that we started. Yeah, and I wanted to receive an answer today, and I still don't have an answer. So there's still where my life is not like how I wanted to be. I wanted the answer, but the purpose of actions and the context for living is completely different.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, because it's something that you're um that fulfills you in many ways, it's okay if it's going to take you, if it takes a little bit longer, it just seems to be all right. The pressure of 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 working, especially working for someone else, or working in a field where you you're basically you're done, you don't want to do this anymore, that even spending, half a day there is so stressful to people.
Hmm.
And again, because the pressure of feeling that they have to do it. Long gone are the days of, you work for a company for, you know years and years and years, and then you retire and they give you, golden parachute and a watch and say, congratulations, and you're taken care of. It's a different world because, as we see, stuff happens, right? So why not, on that crazy, merry-go-round of life, why not do something that brings you joy, that is of interest to you? I think that's one of the smartest things that you can do for you and your kids. You're setting an
Yeah.
example as well for your children, don't you think? Like, not just to do something because everybody's expecting you to, but to do something that is for your purpose, that brings you joy. That's a very
Hmm.
good example, I think, to set for kids.
Absolutely. I think that kids don't listen to what we tell them, but they inherit our blueprint of life. So if you're coming home miserable, unfulfilled, even if you're hiding behind hugs and smiles, kids know. They feel it, they inherit it. And I think part of what it is and being an empowered, impactful human, which is one of the concepts that I bring in my programs, how to be that empowered and impactful, right? One of them is truly being a great example for kids and community where you are. And so your personal fulfillment has a bigger impact than just how you feel.
Mm, that's a lot of power in that. And speaking of children, Misha, tell us a little bit about Worldwide Orphans and your involvement with this nonprofit organization. I know this is something that's near and dear to you.
Yeah, so I've been on the board of this organization for um, 8 years, and I always had a passion for children. I have three adoptive children myself. Worldwide Orphans doesn't have to do anything with adoption, but we work with orphans, but also with other kids, with vulnerable children, with children at war, children with different types of diseases and things like that. So each of our countries has its own specifics. And I always had a dream to bring this organization to Ukraine, but that kind of there was no pathway to that. And when the war happened, it took me about 5 weeks to be like in this major shock. I couldn't even move. And when I was getting out of it, I was like, oh my God, it's time to bring our organization to Ukraine. So we call that organization in Ukraine Children of Ukraine. It's a part of Worldwide Orphans, and we work with children with trauma. So right now, we're doing work with children, refugees. So there was a lot of children that overnight had to escape places where they lived. They lost their social ties, academic ties, you name it, right? So we have a methodology, trauma informed, play based methodology for kids. So they started out programs with children in Ukraine, in Lviv. That's where I'm from. That happened in May. And then in June, I traveled there. So it was great to see my beautiful city, unfortunately, with air sirens and with some damage from bombing and a lot of sad stories. Um, But the great thing that came out of it, there's a lot of amazing people that kind of connected to their purpose and doing great things in a lot of different ways, including with kids. So right now, as we speak, we're conducting our second all Ukrainian training, meaning we have our team in Ukraine that is trained to train others in our methodology. And we currently serving about 250 kids, and I think we'll be doubling that in a matter of days as we opening up new centers after training. And then we are working with schools where we teach teachers, schools and kindergartens to give them the tools of how to be with kids with trauma. And we're about to start to work with the first orphanage in Lviv. So children always kind of that have the most impact by everything that's happening in the world, and um, they're the quietest victims usually.
Yes.
And it's also takes knowledge to serve them, because it's beyond just giving somebody food or toys or clothes. We do much more because we train people in community how to be with kids with trauma. And that's what they really need, to be with other kids, to be in that environment with adults that know how to be with them.
Absolutely.
So I'm very involved with that.
Wow. Is there if people want to find out, how can people support that organization? Is there a website that they can go to?
Yeah, you can go to wwo.org.
wwo.org, and then the information about what's going on there in the Ukraine, they can find that there as well.
Yeah, and you can make a donation if you want to, and we're about to have a gala on November 11th. You can join us. So there's many ways to participate.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. And you're right. You know, well, as the case that in the Middle East and Ukraine and wherever there is war and conflict and things like that, the ones that suffer the most, of course, are women and children. But the ones that we don't really hear about, what they're going through, are the children, and that anxiety and depression and trauma that they have to um, process and live through. And so I'm so very, very honored to have you on the show today, and the work that you're doing is meaningful. You did the right thing. You did the right thing, Misha.
It took me a long time to get here, but I feel like all parts of my life are in alignment right now. Whether I spend time with my family and with my children, and I serve them, whether I serve my clients in their leaps, whether I serve children of Ukraine, I feel like my life is in alignment. And so there's no illusion. It's not an easy life. It's not always pleasant life, but it's in alignment. And that's very meaningful. It's fulfilling, and it feels right.
And you sleep really well at night when you close your eyes and say, yes, that was a hard day, but that was a good day, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. Misha Rubin has been my guest today. He is the mastermind behind the Career Leap Method. And if you would like to find out more information on Misha and his program that he offers, you can go to misharubin.com. I'll have links in the show notes. But if you want that to know, it's misharubin.com. You can go there and find out all about the great work that Misha Rubin is doing. And I want to thank you again, Misha, so much for being on the show today. And I want to thank you, wonderful listeners and viewers, for tuning in today as well. If you want more information about the show, you can go to outoftheboxwithchristine.com. And if you want more information about me, you can go to christineblosdale.com. As always, I want to remind you to think outside that damn box. Bye for now.